Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Massa. I'm Director of Innovation Procurement at the Ontario Centres of Excellence. I'd like to welcome this afternoon's panel. It's called the Supply Chain Excellence, Building Innovation Procurement Capacity. Our panelists today have been involved in programs that encourage collaboration and innovation procurement activities to demonstrate new technologies in the public sector. We're looking forward to hearing about their experiences. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, I encourage you to use the hashtag OCE Discovery. I'd like to introduce our moderator. Christopher Gonsalves is the Director of Supply Chain Programs, Supply Chain Ontario at the Ministry of Government Consumer Services. He's responsible for championing and supporting supply chain transformation and innovation procurement in the broader public sector. To begin, we'll hear an overview of the Advancing Education Program, followed by a moderated discussion. There will be time for questions at the end of the session. At this time, I'd like to invite Christopher to say a few words, and he'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya. So first, let's start with innovation. How do we in the public sector benefit from innovation? How do we mobilize the technology and market forces that are innovating faster than we can keep up with to transform the experience of students, patients, and citizens in Ontario? So the answer is innovation procurement, and using procurement as a strategic enabler for the adoption of innovation. At the Ministry of Government Consumer Services in Ontario, we've been working for the past few years to transform how the public sector does procurement, to drive transformation, and enable the public sector to adopt innovation from the market. So we focused on 4 areas. The first is aligning stakeholders, so that way the various silos are focused on the same priorities. So in the case of education, you have your Ministry of Education, you have your school boards, your colleges, your universities, and your third-party associations, all focused on the same priorities. Enabling policy framework, ensuring that that people know how to do procurement within the rules and yet are able to do it in such a way that it now allows them to buy innovative solutions. Strategic projects, we want to make sure we have some Made in Ontario examples, and we want to use our Ontario Buys grant program to fund these projects so that they can be successful. And advancing education is one of these projects, and we're going to hear from hear about a couple of examples from advancing education in a moment. And finally, ensuring that we have the right skills at the leadership and procurement practitioner level to be able to do the kind of procurement that's necessary to adopt innovation. So this brings us to advancing education. This is one of our key demonstration projects and our first foray into the education sector with a focus on innovation procurement. The Advancing Education project was really about a pull-based approach to encourage innovative companies to solve key education problems. So basically it was about identifying the challenges with the sector, focusing on the top priorities, engaging the market extensively to match companies with innovative solutions with key education sector challenges, doing pilots, evaluating those pilots, understanding what the outcomes of those pilots, so that those outcomes could inform a future procurement. Through the 12 pilot projects funded through this initiative, the program will engage over 14,000 students, over 1,000 educators across both the K-12 and post-secondary education sectors. So for the panel discussion, our panelists will be speaking to 2 of the projects from the Advancing Education program. So with that, let's get into the panel discussion. So our first panelist is Sean Elder, Executive Director, Learning Through the Arts at the Royal Conservatory, who joined with the District Board of Niagara on the Improved Student Education in STEAM through Social Entrepreneurship Project. Welcome, Sean. Second, we have Lionel Loganathan, Director, Academic Partnerships at Knowledge Hook. Knowledge Hook and the Thames Valley District School Board collaborated on the Data-Driven Math Improvement Platform for Students and Teachers project. Welcome, Lionel.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So we'll start by asking each of you to introduce your project and talk a little bit about your company and the solution and what happened. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your innovation, what problem you're trying to solve, and how these programs are helping support the adoption of your project. So maybe we'll start with you, Sean.
Thanks, Chris. First of all, how many of you know the Royal Conservatory or have ever taken a course, or you've had your kids take a course there? Anybody in the audience? Yeah, a couple of hands there, okay. Learning through the arts is a part of the RCM that's not as well known in the public, but we've been busy since 1994. This was created as a program to help public school teachers gain new skills through music and the arts to be able to deliver core curriculum in ways that were really engaging for students. And in the last about 3 years ago, we started looking at issues around how schools could get away from a narrow focus on curriculum outcomes and start looking at learning projects that would both teach curriculum but connect curriculum to real-world problems and situations that are meaningful to students. I think one of the things we've all seen in the world is that kids are getting used to immediacy with technology. They want to see, what's really relevant to them, and they get that power and they get that choice when they're outside school. They don't really get it when they're inside school. So with this program and our partner, District School Board of Toronto, District School Board of Niagara, I'm getting my wires crossed, we looked at how we could take STEM learning and make it much more vivid and meaningful for students by connecting it to something kids really care about deeply and something that they experience in their lives. This kind of challenge is really challenging because you look at what kids do day to day, and the only areas they actually are really super engaged with typically involve technology. And I'm talking about things that kids own the experience themselves. And when we did some initial testing, we found that kids really wanted to be involved in solving social issues that were affecting them and their peers. We heard about mental health. We heard about bullying online. We heard about racism online. We heard a million things from kids, and this is right in their wheelhouse. This is stuff that's affecting them and their peers every day. This is stuff that's getting in the way of their learning at school sometimes. And it's things that they really care about. So we developed a program with District School Board of Niagara to bring problem finding and solving tools and processes, first to teachers and then through teachers to their students. We just completed through this program the first large-scale prototyping of the program. We had done some targeted prototyping, but you never know from a small group if it's going to work. And our team was initially skeptical. Are teachers going to get the same kind of results when we have 100 teachers and 2,500 kids as we got when we had 10 teachers when we did our initial test? And I'm just back from the Connect conference down in Niagara Falls, where we had 10 teams of students coming with their teachers to share their social innovation projects. And it really was the highlight of my career to see these kids. They were ranging from grade 4 to grade 11. And the stars of the show were a little group of grade 4 kids who had an amazing project about how they could counter fake news on social media, particularly things like Punish a Muslim Day. One of the team members had a family member who'd been assaulted on Punish a Muslim Day, which I didn't even know existed. And it was a Facebook kind of a thing in the States where people were getting points if they attacked a person of Muslim background. And these students really were so mobilized around this that they've developed a whole website and a whole campaign to go out and actively target the false news that's going out that's inspiring these kinds of activities. This is huge learning. In the course of doing their project, they had to do data analysis. They had to do all kinds of different aspects of learning. And I think all the teachers were inspired. We were inspired. And the students themselves were so empowered. The group of the ones that came up with the best solution, the teacher had put them into this because they were the 4 shyest kids in their group. And they came on stage and presented to an audience in a large theater, and they were like the most believable, experienced presenters you've ever seen. And you could see the transformation happening. The other side of our work was to find out how to scale this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more because this relates directly to the procurement. In the past, we always worked very closely in an in-service model with teachers. So we would actually bring an expert into your classroom to help the teacher learn skills. We realized that was not going to be scalable. And so we started investigating what there was available for us online. And we found a great lack of a social learning platform out there. There are bits and pieces of it here and there, but nobody's actually put it together as a social learning environment. And we have found that, any kind of profound change in skills is best done in a social environment. We've always done workshops. It's what it takes to really advance change in, in teacher practice. We found, we found a way to deliver this ourselves using bits and pieces of existing tools to create a social learning framework. And we've been able to get the same kind of outcomes and even superior outcomes to what we typically got in a workshop environment through this social learning platform. So we're super excited about where this is going and very appreciative of the opportunity and the big thinking behind this OCE initiative.
Thank you very much, Sean. Maybe Lionel, if you could share your story as well, talk about your innovation and what the problem is and how the program helped.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges that Knowledge Hook is working to solve is we've seen declining math scores in Ontario and nationally since about 2003, and so we were looking for ways to apply technology to that solution. And there was a lot of tools that were out there that focused on the student and trying to actually teach students. And we were finding that technology could only go so far in actually teaching a student. And so Knowledge Hook actually built a technology we call an instructional guidance system, which basically supports teachers in using formative assessment data. So when they assign work to a student in class, we collect that data, we analyze it against the gaps that they identify in their learning, and then we actually help the teacher basically close those gaps by providing them sometimes with the right pedagogical strategy to apply in that situation, and in other instances, actually working with school districts to do training that's more objective than what they would be getting otherwise. So when they have a PD day, a lot of times school boards that we're working with, including Thames Valley District School Board, our partner, use the data that's generated on our system to know where to actually apply that professional development to the teacher, which is huge. And so we've been lucky enough to partner with OCE and the Thames Valley District School Board in this. Our company also won an award from Google in 2016 for Game Changer of the Year for the company most likely to disrupt its industry. And so we're thankful for that. And and through this program, we're actually now working with 9 additional school districts across Ontario and have some opportunities beyond Ontario as well.
Thank you very much for sharing. Really great projects, really focused on improving the student experience, the educator experience, focused on the outcomes and how can we transform what happens in the education sector in Ontario. I have a couple of questions for both of you, and so maybe I'll ask and then you can take turns and provide your answer. So the first one I think is fairly basic. We're talking about doing business with the public sector. We're talking about trying to advocate for and push for disruptive and transformative solutions. So maybe if you could share some of the challenges you've experienced in trying to work with the sector.
I can go first. So one of the challenges that we faced in terms of education is there's so many different levels of stakeholders, and the decision making is so almost scattered throughout the system. So one of the challenges that we have is teachers really love our tool, and teachers and students want to use it, but a lot of times they don't have the decision making power to actually buy licenses. So it was identifying all the different challenges that stakeholders face, from teachers to principals to directors, and trying to find the commonality between all of them and bring them onto the same page. So just because a teacher wants something, it doesn't mean that the board is going to pay for it. And so for us, it was helping them align sometimes their priorities to want to choose a solution like ours. And again, the funding that we've received through the Ontario Centres of Excellence in Advancing Education has really helped us more than with just actually getting our tool into the school boards, actually being able to work through the system and help us navigate talking to the boards. So Thames Valley District School Board has been a real partner with us in basically saying, okay, look, this is how we want to make this decision, and these are all the people that need to be at the table. And they really helped walk us through that process, and that's something that we wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise.
Sean?
I think I just want to talk about what's disruptive about what we're doing, because when you look at how professional development has been done and the high cost of professional development, and I look at even our own work in the past, whenever we did a professional development workshop in a school, you'd have a lot of teacher release time involved, especially if you had multiple teachers involved on any particular day. So you're looking at a cost to the principal of $250, $300 per teacher just to get their time set aside for professional development. Then you have to pay the facilitators and all of their costs, and oftentimes programs are charging $1,000 a day to the school. So you're up into pretty quickly significant sums of money for professional development. Plus, you're trying to do it when teachers are really focused on what they're responsible for in the classroom. We've always found it's difficult for teachers because they feel like if they're not there in the classroom, their kids aren't going to be learning. And so it's not the ideal time. So what's really disruptive about what we've created and is that this is a program designed for teachers, built with teachers' input, and that teachers take from the privacy and comfort of their own home when they get home in the evening. And it's like a 75-minute session. They work collaboratively with teams of other teachers from all over the place. Although we started this in District School Board of Niagara, we're already involving teachers from 4 or 5 different school boards with this. We find teachers love it because they're not bound by the normal processes and the normal small group of people that they interact with. They can, and this is something we all know from the research on innovation. Great ideas come from just often chance encounters with another human being who's been looking at the same problem you have, but bringing a different lens to it. And we found amazing teacher innovation and articulation of problems that they're facing when they work together collaboratively. So the disruptive effect of this is that we offered our entire program for about $250 a teacher, and you compare that is the cost of one day's teacher release time without even cost of a program. So compared to what we've charged in the past for this kind of programming, this program might come in at about 10 to 15% of the cost. It's highly scalable because it's 100% offered online. This can be done all over the province and internationally. We've already had some international inquiries from Holland and a couple of other countries about being part of this process because it is so highly scalable. So that's really been an exciting opportunity because we had with Connect in particular and the OCE support, we were able to engage teachers from a few different school boards, and we've just been to Connect again, and we've found that teachers were just jumping in to sign up for this initiative. And they really like the fact that they can do it from home. It causes some problems because we can't now go through normal procurement in the sense that the school board cannot mandate that teachers do something in the evening. So it has to be done in a more voluntary and invitational way. But if there's funding to offset from the principal can say, hey, if you have an interest in doing this, we have some funds to offset this. This is professional development. It's a qualifying expense for the school to support a teacher in growth. We obviously have to educate the school boards and work closely with them to ensure that they're comfortable with the value that we're bringing to the teacher. But ultimately, we see the teacher as our customer in a way that we didn't in the past. And we have some challenges around how we engage teachers, particularly through things like social media and other ways. How can we reach teachers more directly? Because we really got something where the more teachers are in it and the more diverse their background, the greater the value of the program. So those are some of the challenges that we're looking through, but based on what we're seeing so far, we definitely have disruption potential within professional development. We're already talking to a couple of other organizations about even using this framework for some of what they're doing in the way of professional development. I think this could become, and we're looking at investing to create more of a whole technology environment. For our prototyping, we're working with a variety of apps provided by a variety of existing applications, and we're focusing on the experience and making sure the experience is as strong as possible. Our next step is to actually build the technology so that it's also easy, so that it's ease of use, and you don't have to, download 6 different apps to do this program.
Thank you. So Another point, so we're talking about a program called Advancing Education. And the program is a program around innovation in the education sector, but it's funded by the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services through OCE. And it's done that way with some specific nuances that are different than a lot of other grant programs, with a focus on trying to change how procurement is done, trying to encourage the adoption of innovation through procurement. So maybe if you could talk about some of your experiences with the program, and maybe touch on something that you didn't expect, a benefit of this approach that you observed that you didn't expect, or you know, something that surprised you out of this type of program, this structure. So again, start with you, Lionel.
Yeah, so I think, you know, innovation's a double-edged sword. You know, some of you that are here may be building innovative products and offering innovative services. The challenge with that is that a lot of times traditional industries don't understand innovation, and they have a hard time trying to figure out all the nuances and the benefits that come with having an innovative tool. Especially if you're a newer company and your service offering is new or your technology is new, sometimes having the credibility to be able to walk into an established traditional kind of service or industry, in this case education, it applies to health, it applies to many other industries, you sometimes lack the credibility to do it. And so one of the interesting things about this program was that it actually provided us, at a time when we didn't have as much credibility with our industry, to actually go in and say, hey, look, we've got a program that's supporting us, that's funded by the Ontario government, that's actually supporting innovation in Ontario. And so it really gave us that credibility to go in and have conversations that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. A lot of our partners that we were speaking to felt more secure working with innovation that was supported by the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services and by Ontario Centres of Excellence. So that was really helpful. You know, and when you go through actually trying to get technology into these spaces, that means a lot. That credibility is so important, and that was our biggest takeaway.
Sean?
I really would echo those comments. There are a couple of things that were really interesting. For us, the timing of this really worked well with where we were. As we've been an established organization, but we were into really starting to think like a startup. We had found a problem we thought was significant, and we had actually already had an initial preliminary prototyping of our program within District School Board of Niagara, and they really believed in it. They saw the impact. We had people convinced. What we didn't have yet was how we could scale it out. And I think the great advantage we had was that the district, because they have a whole ecosystem there, they have iHub, which is a really interesting education research environment lab. They work closely with Brock University. They're very plugged into developments in ed tech in the United States, for instance. And so they really were able to say to us, you've got to find a way to scale this online, because though they loved the event that we did, it clearly wasn't going to be something. It just takes too much effort to do things as an extra within education. You know, a special event, much as everyone loves them, they're just way too labor intensive to be scalable in the way that we thought. And one of the people who had been at this initial testing was Camille Rutherford. Dr. Rutherford is one of Canada's leading academics who's studying the role of technology in learning for Brock University. And she challenged us. She said, "You've got to, this program is relevant and necessary in every classroom in Canada. So you have to find a way to provide that access." So then along came the OCE program, which really gave us, I would say, you know, a program structure to take that concept and really explore it and build it out. And in the course of developing the proposal and the application, we were prototyping the online solution already. So by the time we were ready to apply, we actually had pretty convincing evidence that the social learning approach that we were taking was a scalable solution. And the timing of the program, the opportunity to work more closely and to get more time with some of the school board leaders was really important. I would echo what Lionel said. I think getting access to people's time and getting their attention and focus on what you're doing when schools are that is such a huge enterprise to run a large school board. I mean, it's very difficult to get that time and attention. And this program, by creating that, allowed and coming along for us at the right moment. And I'm sure there are lots of startups that are in a similar position. They've got a promising idea, they've tested it to some degree, but need that larger scale of operation before you can really validate it at scale.
If I can just add one more thing to what Sean just said, in terms of the actual structure of the application, what was really good about that is, and in some instances, our plan for how we wanted our technology to fit in education didn't quite fit with the structure, but what it did do was it allowed our partner to think through some of those areas with us, and that was important because for us, we kind of knew where we wanted our product and our service offering to go, but they hadn't really thought about it. So as they were doing the application with us, it forced them to think about it intentionally, and that was really helpful to us. So
yeah, it was a demanding process. Like I think I once counted 47 pages of writing, so it's like this is not a light process, but I think it is structured in a way that's really helpful for thinking through business challenges. One other benefit for us, our organization is well known, so we have some credibility with school boards and some existing entree with school boards because we've actually worked with 10,000 classrooms over the last decade, most of them in Ontario. But interestingly, when we got into this startup mode with the Six Social, we actually had more difficulty convincing internal stakeholders at the Royal Conservatory that this was the right direction to go in. And the reason for that is that it was for them a step too far. We had a public school division. We were bringing music and arts skills into the classroom, and they could see the connection to that. But when we started exploring Six Social, which is social entrepreneurship and design thinking, it was a little bit of a step too far. Some people within our organization couldn't understand what we were trying to do. The OCE validation actually helped us tremendously with some of our internal stakeholders within our organization, and this is now they're realizing why this is such a huge opportunity and why it's such an important project.
So I guess one final question for me before I turn it over to questions from the audience. So procuring these types of solutions is very different than a traditional buyer-vendor relationship. I'm going to put out an RFP, I'm going to have call and response in my RFP, I'm going to ask you questions, you're going to give me answers. It doesn't work like that. So I think in the last answer, both of you talked about the partnership with your education provider and how that works. So maybe if you could share a couple of things that you learned from working with your education provider, either from them or from the process of collaborating together. And again, I'll start with you, Lionel.
So for us, we'd actually, as we were planning to apply through this program, we were looking at different ways in which we would best be able to get the support. We started working with somebody kind of in mid-management at the school district, and so they didn't have all the authority they needed to make something like this happen. But what we did was we actually worked with them to then get connected to literally the director of the board. Her name is Laura Elliott from Thames Valley District School Board, and she was a great support. And one of the things that we suggested to her was that this is an opportunity for them to demonstrate their leadership in terms of working with an emerging technology and an award-winning technology, and something that could potentially cement them as a leader in their industry, and really demonstrate to other districts how their example can be applied in their own context. And so that was important. And her leadership was so incredible throughout this whole thing. Their entire board has been really great about opening up and being able to answer questions to others. So one of the things that she did when she got involved is she said, well, if any other districts have any questions that they want to ask us, we'd be more than happy to do it. And so a lot of districts actually took them up on that. And as a direct result of this program, we are in 9 other school districts, and many of them actually called Thames Valley District School Board and actually in some cases went and actually saw the tool being used in the classroom. And that's obviously exactly what the purpose of doing this is, and so it's been helpful to Thames Valley as well. And they actually just attended a conference with us in Washington, D.C. to talk more about this and actually share about the program and the way they started working with us. And so that leadership has now expanded beyond her vision of just having leadership in Ontario into North America wide, which is great for us, for them, and for the program.
That's excellent. Sean?
There's a really interesting thing in Niagara is that they're actually trying to build a whole ecosystem around innovation in education. So they have the Connect conference, which draws educators and gives a showcase, but they're trying to build, they've got the iHub, which is a lab, an in-school lab for testing out how new projects and programs can work with students, but they're also building now a tech incubator that's specific to ed tech in that region. And one of the things we see is that we've created something here which could be the beginning of a new ecosystem for education in Ontario, where there is an online, scalable, low-cost solution for skill development for teachers, where we could build in community connection. This is something everyone wants to see. How do you draw on the expertise of the community? This project provides a window into that, because you've got kids who are learning to develop technology, build websites, social media campaigns, apps. They're doing some app development as part of this program. There's a great opportunity there to link from our project to a whole lot of other areas of expertise, and that's within the vision of Niagara as well. They've got strong connection to the community. So we see working with them that it's a forward-thinking board, and they're bringing a lot of different pieces to the table because they realize in our day and age, learning cannot stop at the four walls of the classroom. And we all need to be thinking about building an ecosystem, an environment that makes it easy for the community experts to connect with the classroom at the right moment to have a real impact on kids' learning and contribute to the overall success of our education system.
Thank you. So now I'd like to ask and see if there's any questions from the audience for the panelists.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question for Sean. You mentioned a pretty lengthy application process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe the time frame it took for you guys to come from your idea, find your partner, and then go through this innovative procurement process?
Yes, we already had a relationship with the school board, so that was very positive. And the OC also put together an event in Waterloo where they tried to bring together tech startups and school boards. And I think that's a gradual process. I think they would like to see more school boards participate in this over time. So if you've got an idea and you don't have a partner, it's going to take a little more effort until more and more school boards come forward into that process of matching up. And I think the OC vision longer term is for that to become something really robust, so that the schools actually bring forward the problems, and then they go out to the developers to see who might have the elements of a solution or an early prototype for a solution and try to match them up. In our case, we had already done some of that work ahead of time. As for the application itself, it's in two parts. So you never want to invest a huge amount of time without having a reasonable likelihood of a good outcome. And so they do have a very short form initial expression of intent letter process, which took maybe a day or a day and a half of effort to get that really nailed down. We had the partner in place. We put that in. We made it to the next round, and then there were, you weren't guaranteed that you were going to be successful, but it began to be, okay, I can see that I've got maybe a 1 in 3 odds or something, or 1 in 2 odds of getting through to the final, to the funding. So then it justified an effort, which probably did take a couple of weeks of concentrated effort. Over an extended period. Realistically, it's like a couple of weeks of our lives went into, and we have a small team. Let's say there were 2 or 3 people working on this pretty intensively for a couple of weeks. The school district is important, and they're responsible for the financial aspects. So, that part of it, they're contributing. a lot of this is thinking through how the business will scale. It's thinking about some of the impediments and some of the things that you need to validate before your current solution is going to qualify for a larger scaling up within education. So it was very worthwhile, but it was it took a concentrated effort. But at least by the time we got to that point, we already knew that we had a good chance of being successful.
Just to add to what Sean mentioned, what I would suggest to you is if you've already got a good idea of who your clients are and who you're actually trying to work with, start there. And because it's the same for us, we actually already had a relationship with the partner, and we actually marketed that opportunity to a few different partners that we had, and we kind of polled them to see who was going to be interested in working with us, and a couple of different districts got back to us and said, hey, we'd be interested, and then so we kind of did our own vetting process on that side, right? And so because it was something that they'd already indicated some interest in, and so we were able to leverage that interest to find a strong partner.
I think we have time for one other quick question.
So I have a question for Lionel, because you had mentioned that there was a disconnect between the demand for Knowledge Hook solution was from teachers and students, but the purchasing decision was at the school board level. So how did Knowledge Hook navigate that disconnect? And also, when you're looking to sell your solution to other school boards, how do you make that connection where you can penetrate at that school board level to get the buy-in and support?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things that we found was in Ontario anyway, all the school districts are set up in a very similar structure for the most part. Some of the titles might be a little bit different, and typically when we started looking into the U.S. market, it was very much the same way. There's some general structure, so it was just aligning those pieces in that first board and just trying to figure out, okay, as each stakeholder group that we have to work with to get this solution in, who do we actually have to engage and what do they get out of it? And that was really it. Like for us, the teachers and students were coming to us and saying, "Oh man, this benefits us. This is great. We love this." It wasn't so obvious for principals. It wasn't so obvious for district leaders, and so it's our job as a business to actually market to them in a way that they can understand and articulate our solution in a way that they see value. And we worked really hard to do that. And then we actually worked really hard to show teachers and principals how they can demonstrate value up. And even at the director level, at the superintendent level, we showed them how they can use our tool to actually report the stuff that they're already supposed to be doing and how they can meet their own objectives through using our tool and working with us. And we really worked with them on that. And we were intentional in the design process as well to make sure that there were pieces that they could actually, kind of hook onto. And and then we just basically took that same process and replicated it with every board. And it takes some work, right? Like, I mean, nothing that, you don't work for is worth having. And so we worked through that process, and over time, we actually became really good at it. So.
Thank you, everyone. So at this time, I'd like to thank all of you for your participation, and I'll turn it back over to Tanya to close the session.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you to our panelists, Sean and Lionel. Your insights, you've given a lot of information for us to think about the valuable knowledge in terms of how we can introduce and encourage innovation projects, innovation in the education system. On a personal note, I was happy to hear the collaboration between the schools and the solution providers. I think that's amazing in terms of the future of learning. Specifically, the engagement of the students I thought was really special. That how they're engaged in their own learning and their own future as well. So for the panelists here, I encourage you to just outside the theater. There's a display on several other education projects, some health projects as well. If you want to get a sense of how these projects come together, what the solutions look like, I encourage you to do so. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Massa, and I'm the Director of Innovation Procurement at the Ontario Centres of Excellence. Welcome to this afternoon's panel on innovation procurement in Ontario. It's my pleasure to introduce the second panel, Better Care Close to Home, Adopting and Sharing Innovation to Improve Ontario Healthcare System. The Health Technologies Fund, or you'll hear us referred to as HTF, fosters partnerships between publicly funded health service providers, patients, academia, and industry to drive collaboration. This improves patient outcomes, optimizes the impact of the investment in health innovation, and scales health innovation companies. Our panelists today have all participated in an HTF project, and I know we're looking forward to hearing about their experiences. And a reminder, if you want to join the conversation at Discovery, I encourage you to use the hashtag OCEDiscovery. At this time, I'm going to introduce our moderator and our panelists. Jonathan Sachs is the Health Service Provider Lead from the Office of the Chief Health Innovation Strategist, and he'll be our moderator for today. In his current role, Jonathan oversees the Health Technologies Fund. He works to help scale and spread new innovations that meet the urgent need of healthcare providers, while also delivering improved patient outcomes and better value throughout the health system. Our first panelist is Gary Baskey, Executive Vice President and General Manager of NextJ. NextJ is currently participating in the Connected Community Health Services Connected Wellness Project. Our second panelist is Rudy Jambrozik, Inspector of the Brantford Police Department, who's involved in the Improving Mental Health by Connecting Police and Community Services project. Next, we have Fahima Osman, breast surgical oncologist at North York General Hospital. She joins us to speak about the patient portal for breast cancer survivorship project. Finally, we have Michel Paquette, CEO of Atonix. He brings the company's perspective on the TouchAway tablet app to connect patients with caregivers. To begin, we'll hear an overview of the HTF program objectives, followed by a moderated panel discussion. There'll be questions at the end, so I'll encourage you to raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you as this is being recorded. So next I'll invite Jonathan to kick this off and say a few words. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Great, thanks, Tanya. Can you hear me okay?
How's that? Okay. Hopefully that's the only error. Okay. So thanks, Tanya. So my name is John Saxon from the Office of the Chief Health Innovation Strategist. I want to set a bit of context for us today just to give you a bit more background on where HTF is coming from. And then we'll try and reserve most of the time for our panelists to hear about their experiences in actually doing projects and making change in the system. So quick background. So about 3 years ago, the Ontario government realized that we weren't doing a great job when it came to health innovation or even innovation more broadly in our healthcare system. So they did a couple things to try and fix that. So the first was, as governments do, they appointed an expert panel. An expert panel went and did a bunch of research to figure out what the issues were and made a bunch of recommendations. So two of those recommendations were that are key to HTF were, number one, the creation of the office I work for, which is the Office of the Chief Health Innovation Strategist. They appointed a Chief Innovation Strategist whose name is Bill Charnetsky. And then a second recommendation was to actually create the Health Technologies Fund because there's recognition of a gap in funding for real-world projects that generate evidence, that try new technologies in our system, sort of beyond just prototyping early-stage research, but really applying it to the real world and making a difference sort of in the health system itself, and particularly with an eye to procurement and ultimate adoption of those innovations. So in response to the recommendation, HTF was created. It has a $20 million allocation. That's given out over 3 rounds of granting or three rounds of funding. So each round is about $5 to $6 million each. Every project, when it comes to HTF, has to start with a health service provider. So a health service provider is the lead applicant. They identify a problem they have. They look around and say, we've got a problem. There's a technology company that may make a solution, and they're looking for a grant to help test or pilot that solution in their care setting. So most of these projects have a duration of up to 24 months. And even though the funding comes from our office, it's delivered by our partners OCE in very close collaboration. So as I mentioned, that's HTF. The program itself has 3 streams, all sort of corresponding to different levels of development when it comes to a technology. So the first stream was the prototype stream. It was to test the first iteration of your technology. That stream actually hasn't been included in rounds 2 and rounds 3 because we want to focus more on larger scale adoption and larger scale sort of pre-market early adoption projects. So that includes stream 2, which was pre-market. So that was after you've got a prototype, if you're testing your technology in one site. Or stream 3 is if you've already tested it in one site and you're looking for multi-site pilots, or looking at the integration issues of a technology that works in one site and how it could work across multiple, was really sort of the intention behind stream 3. So in rounds 2 and rounds 3 of the program, those latter streams are really the primary focus. So that's really just some background on HTF. All of my colleagues here on stage play different roles when it comes to HTF projects. We've got a mix of technology partners and entrepreneurs, along with end users and clinicians. So the way I'm going to start actually is starting with Michelle and going across is really if you could spend a few minutes giving a bit of background about yourself, the problem at the core of your project, and where your solution fits in, and sort of what you're trying to accomplish with your HTF project.
Could you hear me fine? Yep. So at Etonics, we're all about simplifying complexity of care at home. We are developing a platform called the A Touch Away. It's a platform that helps for connecting patients and professionals of healthcare by sharing information, and it's all about coordination of care plan. We work with the health links in Ontario. So the applicants for the HTF was actually the health link of Empire and Upper Canada. And the challenge that we were actually trying to address in the context of the health link was, in Ontario, there's 680,000 people for which are actually our chronic patients. And what we're trying to do is reduce the admission rate and ER visits for those patients. So one of the challenges that the health links are facing is to support those people at home. So scalability is becoming a big issue. And that's where, with the A Touch Away and the product that we offer, we were able to actually help them on overcoming this issue of scalability. We focus really on 3 items, which is actually outcome of the patients. We focus also on the experience of the patients with the healthcare systems, and finally, time to maintenance. So what we're after is really about scaling the number of people that we could support with chronic disease at home by helping the health link to achieve that.
Great.
The problem that that we're tackling in healthcare system right now is cancer care sustainability. We know that in 2020 there's going to be many survivors in breast cancer, and it's because we've been so good in terms of screening and also survivorship care. And currently, the way we look after breast cancer patients is within the cancer center, and patients are seeing multiple specialists throughout the 5 years after they survive. And Cancer Care Ontario has been mandating to transition patients back to their family doctor because they can get just as good care. And also, this will also help us basically get the patients seen and get better care in the community. Since this will also allow us as cancer specialists then to focus more on complex cases and also decrease wait times in the healthcare system. And it's also related to having a lot of healthcare savings for the government of Ontario. But the issue is that it was basically difficult coordinating the care and transitioning patients back to their primary health care. And what we did with our vendor partner, the company's name is Verdo, is develop a patient portal tool which would help breast cancer patients navigate the system by knowing what their cancer journey is about, and also help the care providers like the specialists and the primary care doctors to have a communication tool where they can transfer knowledge. One of the main problems that we found in transitioning patients back to family doctors is that if, let's say, a new cancer knowledge develops, we were basically scared to get back patients into the community and translate that knowledge. And with this tool, it allows us basically to communicate to not only the primary care providers, but also the patients as they are transitioned to the community, to let them know if there's any new cancer development in their survivorship care.
Great.
Good afternoon. Test. Good afternoon. I'm from the Brantford Police Service. I'm Rudy J. Ambrosic. And the problem that we were suffering is in the community of Brantford is same as other cities here in Toronto and across Canada, is dealing with those with mental health issues in our community. It's a number one call for service in most police agencies. How can we do that? We're the first responders. And as a first responder, what we did is we brought most our patients to the hospital. Let them make the decision if the person should be admitted or not for that assessment. And what does that do? It bogs down the emergency rooms of the hospital. So we had a meeting with the hospital. The hospital says, you know what? And with the bogging down of patients at the hospital, it makes our waits as police officers longer at the hospital. So we're waiting 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 7 hours, 2 officers, 8 officers, 10 officers. Those are officers that should be on the road protecting the public. So we had a meeting with the hospital. So the hospital says, you know what? We'll make you a deal. Bring us a better patient and reduce your wait time. We said, fantastic. We walk out, we're in. As we walk out, we go, how are we going to do that? So he said, well, if we partner up with a mental health care agency and ride with a police officer, that might help us. It'll help us make a better decision at the road at that time when we meet those persons in crisis. But we still needed something to gel us together. That's when Health IM came in. It was a company, 2 young, very intelligent gentlemen, how we can conversate, how we can communicate as the 3. So it's a collaborative. It's a collaborative between the police, the hospital, and our mental health care provider in Brantford, which is St. Leonard's Community Services. Us working together. How can we communicate? And that's through an application. So information is shared by all 3. As we're sharing information is, what can we do better for the patient? You'll see in most police services, they just identify those that are admitted to a hospital. So those that are deemed under Section 17 of the Mental Health Act and under Mental Health Act, and they're formed at the hospital. We track all persons with PICs, persons in crisis. It doesn't matter what level they're at, we track them. Why do we do that? Because we have a full mental health history of that patient at the end of the day. So if I meet an individual 10 times, and I put 10 brief mental health screeners on this individual, I have a whole mental health history of this individual as a police service. How does this help us as a police service at the end of the day? It gives us a more informed decision when dealing with that individual. What does a more informed decision do? It gives me more tools to handle or to deal with that situation differently. So we don't rush in, so avoid those worst case scenarios where an individual in our community is harmed or shot. So that is very important to us with the case management piece, and we've worked very closely with Health IM. Now you say, how has that helped in the short term? To have a true reflection of our community, last year in a city of Brantford of 95,000, we put in 2,600 brief mental health screeners on this individual. Those are the picture of that individual at the time we met them. From that, we've diverted 80% away from the hospital. And as you well know, each assessment at the hospital is $400 for a person that's assessed for mental health. So it's a savings for the hospital, it's savings for us as a police service, for our officers, and at the end, it helps the community as a whole. So it gives us a safer community at the end. Thank you.
Great. Maybe pass your mic to Gary in the interim. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm with NextJ Health, and we're a company that is, for several years, focused on providing a patient and family-facing population health platform. So what that means is tools that help an individual with a chronic condition become knowledgeable about their options, the choices they make in terms of those options that they have in treatment, as well as their lifestyle. And then also to support them and nurture them and give them encouragement to change those behaviors that will lead to them living well. So we've done that for several years, and we've got 16 some odd research studies completed in production, and we've got a good system out there, largely for things like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, post-breast cancer, and prostate cancer. But in this particular challenge that we were looking at, and it followed on from a CAMH pilot that we started, there's about 1 in 5 people in our province that have a mental health challenge. 75% of those will present before the age of 25. Largely, that particular cohort drops out of services that are provided in the way that they're provided, and there are not very many provided. So that's actually higher than any other age cohort. So essentially, we have the most critical need being addressing this prior to age 25. Limited services, the services that we provide are not well accepted, or people drop out, so they don't use them, and they don't identify with them. So in collaboration with Reconnect, which services a large chunk of Toronto Central Inn for mental health, and Stella's Place, which is a youth walk-in center that opened a few years ago and was completely facilitated by private funding, they recognized that what we had was the patient owned the data, the patient owned the experience. It was a patient-centered solution first, and that they thought that they could run their clinic based on this transparent model. So in addition to the conventional support of a walk-in center and a youth integration hub, what they also have done is they've taken kids that have made their way through mental health challenges and trained them to be peer support workers. So they actually help coach kids who have gone through, are going through what they've already gone through, and they formalize the content around that. So essentially what we're trying to do is improve the literacy of those that are having a need, provide them access to services where there likely isn't one yet. It takes a very long time to be diagnosed, and if you are diagnosed, then you go onto a long wait list for services. We're trying to decrease the wait time. Of course, there's a direct correlation in research that shows the effectiveness of the intervention relative to how quickly you start delivering it after diagnosis or realization there is a problem. And then effectively, we're letting the young adults engage. And it was very interesting because it's a very formal process that the OC HTF fund goes through to select their winners, and we've all gone through it successfully. But there's a large panel, and we brought to that panel a young adult that is a peer supporter, was a peer supporter at Stella's. And he spoke up about the challenges that he went through, and specifically very depressed, very sad, knew fully that if he wasn't going to improve his sleep hygiene, his diet, his physical activity, if he could do any at all, that he wasn't going to be able to complete school or get a job. He had to change things. And so the burden of trying to track these changes was all left to himself or the occasional meeting with a social worker. So what this platform does is help you collaborate with a peer coach, your colleagues, your friends and family, and take those weekly steps that lead to the changes that you need to live well and have a productive life.
Great. So one thing I'm very conscious of is the projects that we've got across here are very diverse between the populations they're trying to tackle, where they fit in the healthcare system, and all the work that's actually happening. So I actually want to maybe start with Dr. Osman, and we also recognize that we've got clinicians and users along with entrepreneurs. So, you know, from your perspective at least, and I'll ask this as a question for everybody, you know, what's been the biggest sort of takeaway or benefit from participating in this HTF project? So HTF has a number of goals around evidence generation. You've got product development. You've got change management planning. There's a procurement element. For you, what's been the biggest benefit now that you've been participating in a project that's been going on for, I guess, over a year? And so what's your sort of takeaway from that thus far?
Okay. Well, I have to say, getting the grant itself got people to listen to us and get the project ongoing, so which is great. But I mean, this was what I liked about the whole going through the application and working through the grant and the program is that it makes you basically approach the problem as a health innovation team. So partnering with our vendors, we were able to really co-develop the tool, and also it helps us basically work with all the stakeholders and not just to think about just the technology, but also we had to think about how it's going to fit within the healthcare problem and how we can work as clinicians and with the patients and also with the hospital administrators to get the technology developed developed and also into the right hands and really delivering what it's supposed to deliver, which is to provide better care for patients. So it was what I took away from just being part of this program is that it is really a team, a diverse team, and each need has to be basically addressed in each step of the way. And the evaluation part is the key as well, because what with doing basically several evaluation as we worked through the project is that it helped us with basically all the stakeholders to evaluate each interventions as we're going through. So I think it was basically helped us in an organized manner to approach the problem and come up with a good solution at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah, sounds like the collaborative elements are really big takeaways.
Definitely, I would say that.
Let's go to Rudy, and then we'll come back around and finish with Michelle.
What has it done for us as a police service? Not even as a police service. What has it done for us as a community? So we're getting better to have a product. We get better and faster at what we do. Truly, so what? We're getting better and faster at what we do. Does that reduce the amount of mental health care individuals or persons in crisis which go to the hospital? Does that prevent them from calling 911 in crisis? What can we do to that? And with Health IM, they produce a case management piece. The case management piece is to connect with these individuals before they go in crisis. So that is the ideal, to connect with these individuals before they go in crisis, before they call 911, before the neighbor calls 911 on them, before they have to go to the hospital. So if we get a patient then and stabilize them prior to going to a hospital or calling the police, and getting the resources which they require, that was the biggest difference for us. It gave them an opportunity to push the program even further to get that case management piece. What has it done for the community? It reduces our number of calls for service with those with mental health. And I go, well, is that true? Numbers are always increasing. Our numbers haven't greatly increased, but they're always increasing in every community. But we're doing something to try to reduce those numbers rather than just watching them increase. And at the end of the day, what has it done? It's made a safer, healthier community at the end of the day, and that's what we all want.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we've talked in the past a bit about how, what you're talking about is the technology's enabled service delivery changes and the changes in how all the different providers of health or police services in the community work together, provide service, collaborate, and that's reflected in some of the data you're seeing at a city or population level already. So it's not even the technology at the core, it's enabling all these higher level or larger scale changes.
Yes, it's a collaboration and making these three partners, or collaboratives, work together. And as the three working together, we're much stronger than one individual at a time. And it's the communication piece with allowing us to do that. That's what they've conducted. Great.
Gary?
Am I on?
Yeah.
So the first thing is events like this, obviously, OCHIS was wise to team up with OCE as they have a very well-oiled machine and it helps the efficiency of the process, but also that included the rigor in being selected in the first place. So like you indicated, when you win this, people recognize it as an achievement because a lot of people tried to get them and they didn't succeed. So we're very grateful for that and for the promotion that goes around it, and that means bringing out MPPs and others to events and online access. But more importantly, we think is, well, let me just first do a call out to Jenny. I don't think she's here, but the executive director of Stella. She was able around this grant because she wanted to do this program, needed to get it funded somehow. So brought into this on a in-kind basis, St. Joe's Wellness Center, Youth Wellness Center, UHN, CAMH, CHIO, St. Mike's, and the Royal. So we've got the who's who of the teaching hospitals in the field around the province vested in the report that we produce. So then we're trusting that the latter part, which is the knowledge transfer and the scaling part, that you'll help us understand what to do with that result and take the team forward. So that's what really I think is critical.
No, that's great. And we've worked with OC quite closely and have recognized the, to a lot of OCE's credit, actually, the reputation of the program has started to carry things forward a bit more in terms of the number of partners it's bringing out of the woodwork, the number of new partnerships that have developed, and even we've heard of HTF projects where they were not successful applicants, but just the nature of creating a conversation between a technology provider and an HSP has led to projects that happened anyway. So it's nice to see, because we really just want to contribute to this ecosystem more broadly, where innovation is happening, adoptions are happening, and that we're solving problems in collaboration. So that's great to hear. Michelle.
Yeah, I see a lot of advantage of having actually participated to the HTF, and the benefits are actually amazing. First of all, I'd like to encourage anyone to proceed and do it. There's really three big things for us that did happen. Number one is we actually got the funding that enabled us to proceed with the project and really help the community and help people affected with chronic disease, to a point where we actually save a life, which was a big deal for us. It was a big reward personally. It was a big reward for the team. Second thing that, to me, it was a real open eye is the fact that we brought all of those partners together. In our application, we were 9 partners coming together and working to make this happen. So you learn a lot from this. You learn about what's the win for each into this applications. You learn about how you're going to work together. You learn about putting a big project like this together. The third item for me, which is something that I was not expecting, is the visibility that you're getting in this program is amazing. The support that we got through your office and OCE was unbelievable. I had people helping me on a Sunday night, actually preparing the applications and making sure that things happen correctly. It was really amazing. OCE has done a tremendous job to actually support us in this program. The learning was fantastic.
That's great. On the flip side, actually, we'll start with Michelle and go across this way. So it's nice to talk about the benefits. We all love this program, but I'm curious about what challenges you faced, or what your biggest sort of you faced either thus far in your project or facing now. And I know we've talked to some of you about your challenges, and we're trying to work through them. But still, if you could reflect on what challenges you're facing still, despite some of those accolades or the reputation that's coming along.
I guess I'm the lucky one to start. Yeah. Okay, so yes, it's a great program for entrepreneurs and companies to actually proceed with healthcare agencies to come up with new project and helping people. But we're in healthcare, and procurement process is complicated, long. You generate a lot of momentum to your projects. You deploy to patients. In our case, we had 70 patients plus all the nurses, so maybe there is 300 people involved with a lot of impact. And the continuity of this program for growing across all Ontarians and creating the same impact is what we're facing right now. How do we do this? How do we get the procurement done? And that's not clear yet. There is this RFP process that we have to go through. So it's very difficult for us to, and I hate to say this, build this in Ontario and use in Ontario. I wish will be, not build in Ontario and use in the States. But as a Canadian company and Ontarian company, I wish that we build this, help our people in our community to be able to use our platform.
Yes. My boss, Bill Charneski, often talks about, he explains the budget of the Ontario system, which is $55, soon to be $60 billion, and says we absolutely have to leverage it as an economic driver. We're spending $60 billion. Why can't we be thoughtful about that investment in Ontario, support economic growth while also supporting the healthcare system? And it's happening in little ways, but we've still got a long way to go to make that really, really make that happen much more effectively.
So the biggest challenge I think that we faced when we started the project was changing the culture and behavior of basically everyone involved in the care for breast cancer patients. So our problem was basically to try to get breast cancer patients being looked after in the primary health care. And actually there's a lot of evidence supporting that family doctors do just as good care and even better at times than taking care of breast cancer patients. But it was basically trying to convince family doctors that they can do the same good care as specialists to look after the patients. Also letting my colleagues, the specialists, also try to basically embrace this concept and let go of their patients and send them back to their family doctors. And same thing also with the patients too. We had to, the way we approached this challenge was we created working groups with family doctors, specialists, and patients and their caregivers to find out why is it that they're concerned? Why is it difficult to get the care in the community rather than in the cancer center? So I think what at the end of the day, what we've learned in those working groups is that as long as we were able to let them know that going back into the community is a good thing in the end, not only for a healthcare system, but also for patients themselves being looked after by primary care physicians, and to also address with the technology each kind of like apprehension and anxiety about transition. I think that helped us basically change the culture one day at a time, because it didn't happen overnight. It's still ongoing, and we're trying our best to make sure that everybody's comfortable with this change.
Absolutely. Changing the behavior of physicians is no easy task. Rudy?
My position is a little bit different. I'm an end user. So I'm the fellow that says, yeah, this is great, but can you guys do this? And they go, you got to be kidding me. And so I'm the one that's putting a little bit more drive. I'm probably the one that's causing more pressure on them, saying, can we do this? So what we're in the works of doing now, we have the case management portion. Now, when we do a follow-up with an individual that isn't in crisis, what is a standardized form that we can use for that? And soon to come at the beginning of 2019, a form called the Quality of Life form, which we'll be using to do a follow-up for those individuals that aren't in crisis, see what level they're at, see if they've been taking their medication, see if they've been seeing their physician. So that's the next thing to come. So I hate to say that I'm the pain in the butt to the entrepreneurs, and being an end user, it's been fantastic. It's changed the way that we deal with persons in mental health crisis in our community.
No, that's great. The closer we found, at least, and you guys can attest to this, the more your needs and understandings to be built in, whether it's you as a police officer, or service manager, or a patient or a resident, the more that can be built in, the more effective the uptake and effectiveness of whatever solution is being designed.
And everything in that case is client-based. What's best for the citizens of the community? What's best for the client that's in crisis? What do they need? What do they want? What do they require? And it's always based upon not as what we need as a police or what the hospital truly needs or a mental health care provider. What does the patient need? What does the client need?
Exactly. And Gary?
Thank you. I'll give one that's sort of in the program and one that's in the system. We'd committed, on the advice of many, including Ian Mannion, before we even knew where we might approach this, which ended up being in Toronto and Hamilton, that if we didn't adapt what we had to young adults, specifically for engagement both in content and in style, that it would fail, and not to underestimate how hard that is to do. These users are living on their phones, so if they even sense something is inefficient or useless, they're on to the next thing in 2 seconds. So we did co-design sessions, which don't just include practitioners and healthcare professionals and psychiatrists and psychologists, and it also obviously largely includes the people that Stella's recruited as candidates, patients, peer supporters. So the young adults' feedback can sometimes be exhausting and overwhelming to try to take in. So sort of like Rudy on steroids, if we had an awful lot of input. And it's not that easy to do because you have to respond to what's safe legally in terms of health information, storage of information, access, et cetera. So that's been both our biggest challenge and our biggest reward, because we've created an awesome solution, we think, in the outcome. And secondly is in the system itself. I think most people recognize that Ontario and other places in healthcare is a land of pilots. So there's pilots on pilots on pilots, and this hospital has to do their hospital, that hospital has to do it different. And so how do you get past the pilot and get into commercialization and scale and spread? So we're trusting that Bill Chernetsky's wisdom here in stage 1, 2, 3 is going to come through, and we think it will. And so the key outcome of this is producing that co-authored report from a large team of people saying this is what this would need to prove and does prove for us to procure it. So we're hoping to turn that problem upside down on this.
No, absolutely. That's something that's a big focus of the work we're doing, and with the HTF projects and others to see how can we get to scale, support scale, sustainability, and make the change actually happen, and not just contribute to more pilots, as we all know tends to happen or has happened for so long. So that's great. So I'm looking at the time. We've got about 5 to 6 minutes left. Just want to make sure there's any time for questions from the audience. Yeah, so if there's any questions. Yes, you.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming today. This is really good conversation. I think it's great to know about what you're doing, how you're getting involved in the community, these collaborations, which are probably the most important. What do you hope to get out of? What results do you hope to achieve with this third-party report? So we're looking at adoption and diffusion of the solution within the healthcare setting. Maybe we could have one or two of you say specifically what is being measured currently and what outcomes do you hope or do you feel that you will be able to achieve and that will be presented within this report, so you could go and use it as a marketing tool to say, this is my impact to the province of Ontario.
Yeah, I could start. So we work with the Women College Hospital for the evaluation side, and there's 3 items that we're measuring. So outcome for patients, experience with the healthcare systems, but more importantly, we are measuring something called time to maintenance, which really the time from a chronic patients being assigned to health link care coordinators and the providers in an active mode to a less active mode, which is really about I'm seeing my patient less often, which is time to maintenance. And today in Ontario, this time to maintenance, especially with the Lynn Champlain we work with, is fairly long. We're talking about 9 to 12 months, and we're trying to see if we could shrink this time to maintenance. So the current evaluation is somewhat of a small cohort. We will have indications, but are we not going to have enough to say that the health economics are in place yet? So we're going to have enough indication to say, yes, this is actually reducing time to maintenance, but we need to actually have a larger cohort for us to proceed. So, for example, going to a larger with a few hundreds patients will actually put us in a better position for the LIN to make a decision, for example, on proceeding on the data. So we have enough qualitative data from this evaluation coming that will position the LIN to say, yes, this is actually helping us, but in terms of coming up with the economics, a bit more data will be required.
Okay, and for our project, we're working with Claire at St. Michael's Hospital in the Health Economics Department, and there's the key important question we're trying to answer is, does this shift in care save money for the healthcare system? So that's one thing. We were trying to compare 2 models, the specialist model versus transitioning patients back to their family doctor. So does that really save healthcare dollars? And we're right now evaluating this by actually prospectively monitoring patients as they get transitions into the community, and we are looking into the number of visits they have with their family doctor and comparing it to the old model, and then looking basically translating that into cost. And the second part that we're evaluating is the implementation cost. So there is with this model that we're developing at North York is that there has to be basically a nurse navigator cost to the hospital, to a full-time nurse navigator, and at the same time, of course, purchasing of the tool. And we want to look at it in terms of what is the implementation cost to the hospital for this type of model and compared to the old model. And finally, the study that I'm very much excited about and learning more about is how is it affecting the patient in terms of having a tool that shows them basically their cancer journey, gives them lifestyle recommendations, and also appointment reminders, and just basically navigate through their journey. Does that really help in terms of their anxiety and about basically their apprehension of getting back into the community and being looked after by their family doctor? That's also a secondary evaluation we're doing at the same time, and that's what we're hoping to, at the end of the our grant funding, to show those evidence that support this project.
Thanks. Rudy and Gary's really fast. Do you want to give responses?
I think the key that we're trying to prove is that you can digitize and democratize access to mental health services. So the brick and mortar is critical. You don't want to dishonor someone actually presenting themselves, asking for help. You don't want to consume the officers taking them to the merge for Form 1 over the weekend and then dumped out on Monday with no help. So we're trying to quantify that in a report, and that's not easy to write down. We've got a lot of help.
Great. Any examples of your metrics or what you're so focused on for your evaluation, Rudy?
For evaluation, initially it was to decrease the amount of individuals we bring to the hospital, so decrease our trips to the hospital and increase our admittance. So by doing that, by bringing a better patient to the hospital, not all patients have to be stabilized. They're already under care, and it's to bring them to the proper mental health care facilities where they can receive sustained help. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at the constant care or the case management of these individuals again before they go into crisis.
Awesome. So I'm getting a signal that we're pretty much out of time. So thank you, first of all, to my colleagues on the panels for attending and providing all your insights. And thank you to OC for having us. And we're around if there's other questions afterwards as well.
Thank you so much. So just to wrap up our talk today, so thanks to Jonathan, our panelists, so Gary, Rudy, Fahima, and Michelle for your insights. Really special to have you here today. I think you've given us some valuable knowledge on how to better introduce and encourage innovation in the healthcare space. It's great to hear about the level of collaboration. I think that was a common theme that we heard through all of your great thoughts. And also, I'm impressed with the level of patient collaboration, patient engagement and empowerment, and through the site visits and through the engagement we've had with you. That's been, I think, a really important and special part of the Health Technologies Fund. And also, I'd like to take an opportunity to shout out to Jennifer Moles. She's the program lead for Health Technologies Fund and has done amazing efforts in the program, the panelists here, the projects, and also for the folks that are here in the audience, if you want to check out the interactive panel display just outside the theater, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to see the healthcare projects and some of the other sector projects that we work with in education and the public sector as well. So in terms of our next panel discussion, if you'd like to hang out for that one, that's for the Small Business Innovation Challenge, and that's going to begin in 5 minutes. So thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Massa. I am the Director of Innovation Procurement at the Ontario Centres of Excellence. Welcome to this afternoon's session on innovation procurement in Ontario. It's my pleasure to introduce our third panel of this afternoon for the Small Business Innovation, Private Sector Solutions to Public Sector Challenges. The Small Business Innovation Program uses public sector challenges as a platform for inspiring SMEs to develop and test innovative solutions. Our panelists today have participated in an SBIC project, and I know we're looking forward to hearing about their experiences. For those of you who'd like to join the conversation, I encourage you to use social media hashtag OCE Discovery. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator and our panelists. Our moderator today is Robert Bolt. He's our Senior Policy Advisor from the Access to Capital Unit, Ministry of Economic Development and Growth. He's responsible for the delivery of the Small Business Innovation Challenge. Welcome, Robert. Our first panelist is Steve Borza, CEO of Blue Inc. Steve has been working on the project called Blue Inc. EID-Me Digital Identity. Welcome, Steve. Our next panelist is Mike Cook, founder of Identos Inc. Identos project is called Convenient Citizen Private Identity Network, or CCPIN. Welcome, Mike. Next, we have Pavel Stoav. He's the Director of FutureBound Corp. FutureBound's project brought high probability vehicle occupancy detection using non-intrusive combination of IR, visible, and EM spectrum analysis. Finally, I'd like to introduce Igor. He's the Project Director, Business Improvement Division at Service Ontario, Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. Igor will speak to us about the government's experience with the SBIC program. Welcome, Igor. So we're going to begin to hear an overview of the SBIC program, followed by a moderated session. There will be time for questions at the end, so if you're interested in asking a question, please raise your hand. We do have a microphone, and I'd like to hear your voice as we're being recorded. So I'll invite our moderator, Robert, up to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. So I'm going to do just a quick sort of overview of what the SBIC program is, just to give you a sense of what it is we're trying to achieve, how it works, how it's operating. And then we're going to switch to a discussion with some of the companies that are participating in an SBIC challenge, and Igor, who represents the champion ministry. So to start, here we go. So what is the Small Business Innovation Challenge? It's a fully funded and managed platform that takes government problems and or issues of public concern, and it presents those challenges to Entero SMEs and asks them to come up with innovative solutions. So key thing here, fully funded. So it's funded by the Ontario government through delivery by OCE, and fully managed. So ministries that participate don't have to dedicate resources, either HR resources or capital resources, to address the challenge they have. They can explore it through our program. What is it trying to achieve? So fundamentally, it is about helping companies scale up. It's part of the Business Growth Initiative that the government launched a number of years ago, and it's about helping companies take ideas to market. What we're really trying to do is give companies an opportunity to develop IP that they can leverage and grow their business internationally. And it allows for real-world testing and a potential reference customer. If the government really likes what they see and it really solves the problem that they've presented, there's a potential there for that to be adopted and bought by the government. From an innovation procurement perspective, it solves critical government problems where the business requirements are uncertain. So I'll get to one of my next slides talks about what makes for an ideal challenge. But one of the things is that the government doesn't necessarily know how it wants to solve the problem, doesn't know what kind of technologies could be brought to bear to address the problem. So we don't have the information at our disposal to do a traditional request for proposals, right? We can't list a series of specifications. So it's very much an outcomes-based approach. So this is what we would like the world to look like. These are what we see as ideal outcomes. How you go about delivering those as a company is up to you. And the other piece is that it also promotes a cultural shift within government to get a little bit more comfortable with doing procurement in this way or problem solving in this way by tapping into Ontario's innovative community in a way that maybe we haven't been able to do in the past through our typical engagements with business. So how is it delivered? This program, Small Business Innovation Challenge, is a pilot program, and it is being delivered in partnership with the Ontario Centres of Excellence, which is the reason why we're here at OCE Discovery. And it leverages their expertise and experience and their extensive network within the entrepreneurial and SME community to get our challenges out to the right people. So as I said, it's an outcomes-based problem statement, and we develop that with a champion ministry. And Igor is a representative here from a champion ministry that we have. We have 4 challenges currently in market. So, and the 2 points of entry for companies to participate. So it could be that a company has just an idea for how they might go about tackling the problem, but they don't have much evidence to suggest that that idea or that solution is actually possible. And so what we do is we offer $100,000 to do a feasibility and a business analysis of that solution. Could it actually be done? Is it possible? The other is for companies that have a little bit more tech, a little bit more confidence in their approach to the problem, and we offer up to $1 million and 2 years to develop a working prototype. So those are the 2 points, and it depends on both the problem of the solution being proposed, but also the company's own experience and level of maturity. So what makes for an ideal challenge? It was 3 sort of criteria. Tried to keep it simple, but ideally it has to be a public sector problem or an issue of public concern. So a public sector problem is something that the government has a problem with itself, that it needs to be able to address. It's responsible for procuring the solution in that space. Or it's an issue of public interest. So the government may not actually procure the solution, but is responsible for addressing that problem. Climate change, is a good example of that. It's an issue of public concern. So it's got to be a problem within those 2 domains, and where there's no commercial solution or adequate solution currently in the market. So it's got to be an unresolved problem. The problem also has to be in a solution space where where technology is likely to be the driver. The reason for that is we're trying to help companies develop intellectual property they can use to scale and to grow their business, and technology-based IP is a good way to do that. And the other one that we have, the other criteria for an ideal challenge, is that it's got to be a solution. It's got to be a problem where the solution could be applicable to other sectors and industries. So we don't want a company developing a solution, some IP, that only has relevance to one customer, because that's not going, it's not going to support their scaling up and their growth if they can only sell to the government of Ontario and maybe just only that one time. So those are the 3 things. Current challenges. So, as I said, it's a pilot program. We have up to 8 that we're going to run, and 4 are currently in the market. The first 2 that launched were the Digital Identity Challenge, which Igor represents the Champion Ministry, which is the Ministry of Government Consumer Services, that's the one. Vehicle occupancy detection is the second challenge. Going for the digital identity one, what we're looking at there is solutions that allow Ontarians to interact online with government in a common, secure, user-friendly, and privacy-enhancing method. So this is all about unlocking the potential for the delivery of services, government services online. The second one is with MTO, and this problem is, as we roll out HOV and HOT lanes, how do we make sure that we are enforcing it adequately and that we're able to determine how many people are in that vehicle? And so interesting challenge there. The third and the fourth challenges just launched recently. And the third is electronic sales suppression. The Ministry of Finance is the champion there. And this is about looking for a user-friendly, cost-effective, and secure solution for preventing electronic sales suppression around sales tax fraud. And the fourth is cannabis and drug-impaired driving challenge. And this is about helping police by developing solutions that allow for the determination of impairment from drugs, primarily cannabis, THC. This is, of course, in light of the pending legalization. So I'm using up all of our good time here, so I'm going to just skip. There's no questions at the moment. You're going to have to wait for those. I'm going to kick it off with some questions to our panelists. But if I can ask just really quickly, if you could just say a little bit about your company, just to set the scene. I'm going to limit that to a minute. If we can go this way, Pavel, you first, Mike, and then Steve, and then Igor. I'm going to skip you on this one, if that's okay. Yeah. So Pavel, tell us a little bit about FutureBound.
Thank you, Robert. And FutureBound Corporation is a professional engineering services organization, and we work in the intelligent transportation sector, developing solutions, developing software for Departments of Transportation, Ministry of Transportation, and generally for the technology areas where movement of people, movement of goods is involved. And recently, we've entered into the SBIC program, and we're partnering with other technology firms, particularly IBI Group, a global leader in smart cities, forming a sort of a strategic technology partnership and developing and delivering our R&D and services into the market sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Pavel.
So Identos Inc. is a security company located here in Toronto, as well as offices in Munich. We've been around for just about 4 years now, developing encryption products for mobile applications and digital identity products to help authenticate users. Most recently, we also acquired a business out of Sweden to integrate smart card technology into smartphones. That's used quite a bit in governments around the world.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Borza, CEO of Blue Inc. We're an Ottawa-based company. Our focus is on phone as a token security. So basically logging into anything using your smartphone as your authenticator device. We can do password management, two-factor authentication, federated login, all using the smartphone as the device to log you in. We have an e-identity challenge with Ontario, and we're building a solution called eID.me, which will allow citizens to register from home without going into a Service Ontario office, and have strong identity proofing, scan the existing cards you have, take a selfie, and we'll make sure you are who you say you are. Once you do that, we issue you an identity, an e-identity to your phone, and then you can use that to log into government websites, to log into commercial websites, and even assert your identity face-to-face. So if you want to log into a medical clinic, or enroll at a medical clinic, you can tap your phone. It'll push all of those 50 questions they may ask you at a hospital. It'll push them to the ingestion terminal, and you don't have to answer any questions. It gets your information right in 5 seconds instead of 5 minutes. So it's really about leveraging smartphone technologies to speed up security and authentication in multiple use cases across Ontario.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, gentlemen. So my interest in some of the questions that I'd like to ask you is to try and understand if participating in the Small Business Innovation Challenge has allowed you to approach the way you do business a little bit differently. So my first question is, in terms of innovation and coming up with new ideas and developing products and solutions that you look to then sell to the market, has participating in the SBIC allowed you or encouraged you or made you approach innovation differently than you would for, say, a project that was client-funded or self-funded? Pavel, I'll ask you to answer this one first.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So the way the SBIC program is set up, there's phase 2 and phase 1 and phase 2 funding, and with phase 1 being 100%, that really lets us kind of focus on radical and challenging ideas in responding to the problem statement. So we can really apply ourselves and go out there and find something that we believe will solve the problem. And with 100% funding, we really focus on that particular radical and challenging solution, which may not work, may work. It's out there, but we're here to solve the problem using that approach.
So I guess you would say that you're taking larger risks than you typically would do if it was your own money behind it. Mike, would you say that's kind of similar for you? I mean, you guys are doing a phase 2, so you've got $1 million and 2 years to work on up to 2 years to work on your project. Are you pushing innovation harder through SBIC than you may have done at another time?
Yeah, I think that the answer is absolutely true. We're taking more risk. As a result of the program we're participating in through OCE and SBIC, we're able to double the size of our company in a very short order period of time to deliver a solution to a problem that was quite well defined, actually. So we're walking into something that is essentially a bit future-proof. So our perceived risk is low, but it's allowed us to do things like turn down a very seriously sized term sheet and retain ownership of our company, right? So we're taking a lot more risk as a result of this program and delivering a fantastic product.
So in addition to growing the company, so more people, and being able to keep control of your company for longer, is there anything about the way in which you undertake the innovation itself, the exploration of the solutions? Are you doing that differently, do you think, or is it similar?
We're doing it very differently. Like other programs you might find that are really just R&D, sole technology, IP generation, like IRAP, you're not really thinking as commercialization as much, right? And so because this problem was so well defined, we are really building a solution. That solution requires some IP in it, so you're a lot closer to the path of commercialization from the get-go, right? Just because of the way the problem has been positioned. Moreover, as a result of the way the problem is positioned, you're able to go out and forward sell it I've been selling it to customers for months now, and it's not even done. And you know what? They want to buy it.
Steve, because I'm really interested in this particular question in terms of whether or not the SBIC is really helping companies push beyond their sort of traditional approach and comfort level to help them, you know, the scale up needs to take those risks. And do you feel that the SBIC participation is allowing you to do innovation a little bit differently? You can say no.
Absolutely. I do think it's allowing us to focus on a problem. Conceptually, e-identity, we were proposing that we could do it before the SBIC program. And we showed it to Ministry of Transport, what we could do with phone and local authentication. And their answer was, could you make a card do that? And we were, well, it would be a very expensive card and it would look like a smartphone. So ministries that are very invested in their existing technology don't really want to see disruption. Conceptually, we can make a phone behave like a driver's license, like a health card, with tremendous more abilities on it. Biometric reauthentication. Everyone uses their Touch ID on their phone that says, I'm the owner of this phone. You can't do that with a card easily. So conceptually, to do identity, a card identity, you need a government saying they want it. And SBIC allowed a government to say, we would like to explore this. Without it, we're just putting our hand up in the wind saying, yeah, people are going to do this in the future. You need government buy-in to say, we will support this technology and it'll make life better and simpler and faster and more efficient for our citizens. And so we get to build the tech we knew we could build with a customer behind it. And we actually have people signing up for our POC this summer to put this live into medical clinics and accessing medical lab information for citizens securely. So, and they didn't sign up because we were coming as a individual small business. They signed up because of the SBIC program backing us, saying Ontario is looking at how to do this, and they are, you know, paying our way to develop this and deploy it. So I think it's very exciting to be able to do that.
Great. Igor, I'm not going to leave you just sort of hanging out over there quietly. So first thing, just tell me what your role is within MGCS and the project you're working on, and then I would like you to answer the question in terms of your participation in SBIC. How has it allowed you to look at this problem you have or approach this problem you have differently?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Igor Celeste. I'm the project director for the Digital Identity Project with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. My branch and my ministry has been tasked with taking the leadership role for identifying a future digital identity program for the province. So our ministry and our province recognizes that for Ontario to be competitive in the digital marketplace, we need to look at and come up with a solution to the digital identity problem. So you've heard some of the comments by both Steve and Mike regarding the work that they do, and it's definitely the things that we're looking at from a provincial perspective as to how do we create a digital representation of an individual that they can actually take with them, interact with, in a purely digital context to actually unlock access to not only government services, but also private sector services as well. So if you think of every single time you pull out, let's say, your driver's license or your passport as a means of, you know, proving who you are, we want to be able to do that in a purely digital context, okay? And that's the challenge that we're faced with. And for us right now, there is no solution out there that that we see is, you know, one size fits all for government. So my branch is taking the leadership role to actually come up with what is our direction, what steps that will the province actually take in the future to actually implement such a program. So as part of that, we've engaged the Ontario Centres of Excellence as a champion ministry to this problem. And what's refreshing about this particular approach is that this has given us an opportunity to actually get direct access to innovators within this marketplace, in this market segment, where we can actually not only test the theories and the hypotheses that we have around digital identities, but actually have that ongoing dialogue with the various vendors that are participating in it. So for us, this is a very, very different, refreshing approach. And I think what Robert was saying, you know, historically, ministries would just list a requirement, say, here's our problem, you know, put that out to the marketplace, and then you kind of wait for the vendor community to come back and you just evaluate. In here, it's an ongoing dialogue. We have 5 vendors right now that we meet on a quarterly basis. We talk to them about their approach, how they're actually innovating towards very specific solution problems. And then we're bouncing the ideas back with them in terms of what we know and the market research that we've done and the jurisdictional research that we have done as well to confirm that our thinking, that our approaches are actually sound. And what's actually happening is that there is a dialogue going back and forth. And ultimately at the end of this, phase 2, we're looking at possibly, selecting one of these vendors as, proving out, some of the concepts that we have, whether it's actually going to work for government or not. So.
Great, and so I should have mentioned in my presentation as well that there is an additional phase at the end of phase 2 in the SBIC program. That is called phase 2.5, very, very creative name for that. But what we're doing is government, the Champion Ministry has the opportunity to, in a non-competitive procurement environment, select one of the solutions and run a pilot with them. And there's funding associated with the program for that as well. So it's that taking it one step further and actually doing that pilot is kind of your equivalent of a reference customer. Once you have that as a company that's looking to sell and to grow, having the Ontario government as a reference customer is something that's really, really quite powerful. So just thought I'd mention that. Another question now for our participants, SBIC participants. I wondered if you'd had any experience working with the government before your participation in SBIC. In a way, you're not really working for the government right now through SBIC, but it's a pretty close proxy for it in terms of you're meeting quite regularly with a potential customer. So, question is, have you worked with the government before? And if not, have you tried? Has the government been a target for you before? And has working with on the SBIC program helped you, do you think, in terms of looking at the government as either a new potential client or understanding how to work with government going forward? So a handful of questions in there. You can grab whichever one you want there, but have you worked with the government in the past? Start there.
Yes, that's a quick answer. So we are working with various levels of government, provincial, municipal, through our engagement with transit agencies, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Government Services. But our experience in the SBIC program and in working with the government is a little bit different so far. And like Steve mentioned, it's not a list of requirements in the RFP that we're responding with. We can be a little bit more creative. We can propose interesting and new innovative solutions. But most importantly, so far, the benefit that we've seen is that we can suggest perhaps legislation or acts that may in the future be enacted to allow the technology that we're developing, and I'm speaking particularly about the vehicle occupancy detection, allow the technology to be put out there in the field and to work together with legislation.
Great, thanks. Mike?
So the short answer is no. We haven't worked with the Ontario government in the past. As a smaller company, quite often business development conversations are where large organizations and jurisdictions go to learn about what they want to solve. But then the smaller companies have a tougher time in procurement, obviously. We partnered very early on with a large partner here in Canada, TELUS, with intent of procuring through TELUS for government and banking relationships, the type of relationships that might make it challenging for a smaller company to kind of ride out the timelines and also meet some of the procurement requirements. So this experience has been, exceptional compared to what I know I would have went through in a procurement process, because it's a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's ongoing, and we're all talking about the same kind of pan-Canadian end state that we want to be at. So there was a common language from the get-go. I think Igor and Steve and I all sit on the DIAC, there's much more meaning than receiving an RFP notification through Merck's.
Great, thanks. Steve?
So I will say we have bid some government procurement contracts with some of the hospital networks for single sign-on. It was a lot of work. We submitted our bid, and a year later, this hospital network decided not to do anything. So that, you know, for a small business to invest a lot of time and effort in a procurement, and, you know, at least award it to someone so I know where I'm lacking. Awarding it to no one is criminal, okay? Okay, probably not criminal in the sense, but it certainly wasted a lot of our time.
I take no responsibility for this, Steve,
and it was not from around here, so I won't name the network. In the past, I've done a lot of contracting with the federal government at a different company, and it's painful. They're very big bids. You need partners, but they were multi-million-dollar contracts, so you expect that. I think the thing about this challenge, and certainly in e-identity, this is a new space, and as you say, you can't have a bulleted list of requirements, and a waterfall process that takes 3 years to build it once it's contracted, and after the 3 years you get something you didn't want. And I'll just put an example. We were on a big contract with the federal government years back, a military program for $1 billion communication system. Everything needed to be Tempest enclosed, and by the time they got their fax machines at year 10, the thermal paper Tempest fax machines, you couldn't buy thermal paper for them anymore. And they got these beautifully enclosed machines, and they threw them in the garbage and said, "Could we get some normal fax machines?" So sometimes the government process moves slower than technology, and certainly in e-identity, it's going to move slower than technology. And this stuff's just going to keep moving, and you do your best to keep up, but you need a real agile approach to the development, not a waterfall. And we do stuff on 2-week sprints, and you can't do that bidding a procurement doc.
Very true. Very true.
Yes, government contracts are very big, and they're very slow, and they're very painful, even for us. So totally agree with you, Steve, on that front.
So Igor, can I ask, participating in the SBIC as the champion ministry, do you think you're going to be able to approach the procurement of this solution if, in fact, when I should say, not if, because we will need to get to this point where we all have a digital identity. Will you procure differently, do you think? Will you learn something from this process that will help the way that we procure that solution?
I'm hopeful that we will use a different procurement method and process to execute on what we need at the end of the day. But in terms of the more important question I think that you've asked is, what have we learned from this? I think we've actually learned quite a bit. By having direct access to the vendors and the vendor community, it's actually educated us and actually reaffirmed some of the thinking that we've already had. So, to Steve's point around, putting something into, let's say, a requirement document that is going to be outdated, I think we're well beyond that point, right? So my team has got a little bit of a luxury in terms of approaching this with an open mind. We don't have a vested interest in old legacy systems or technology, so we're not shackled by, the legacy of, some, previous government investments. We're actually going into this very, very open-minded with the opportunities that actually exist out there from the marketplace. And what we're seeing from the vendors that are actually involved, the solutions are all quite different. All the approaches are different, which is giving us additional food for thought. Now, how do we go about procuring that? That's the interesting part, right? And that's the part that I'm looking forward to, where we can actually be more agile, more nimble in terms of getting bits and pieces of our solution in place. That's what I'm looking for.
Great, thank you. I do want to give a chance for questions. We still have a bit of time, so if you don't have any now, that's fine, but think of one. We do have a question, excellent. That we can avoid having more of my silly questions. Gentleman here, sir.
Okay, at the beginning you showed 4 themes that you're looking at for the...
4 current challenges in the market, yes.
Yes, so are there going to be more themes
4
released?
more are coming out.
And when would we know that?
So we're hoping to launch 2 more in September, October. We like to launch them in pairs. And then the final 2, we're thinking about the spring of 2019.
any opportunity for input into those?
For sure, we're always looking for ideas for potential challenges that we could launch. So we don't have a mechanism to take those in because it's a pilot, but I'm definitely willing, and OCE as well, to learning about ideas that you might have for challenge areas.
So you can tell me if this is off in left field somewhere, but my colleague and I are working with a number of rural municipalities to help them deal with the Ontario government open data initiatives, and the data is just pouring out of the Ontario government like a fire hose, and we're trying to help at the other end of that, and we think this we think that the system we're working on has a potential to solve a problem that the Ontario government's creating, a good problem.
Yeah.
But there's no program that deals with that. The philosophy of this program seems to be around dealing with those kinds of issues.
Yep.
But there's no clear path forward for what we're doing.
So I would encourage you to speak with Laura, who works at OCE and manages the SBIC program, to explore that in more detail to see whether or not it would fit. It's difficult sometimes to find the right kind of challenge for an SBIC, just because of the nature of the way in which we are going about the program. And we have 3 criteria that I went through early on there in terms of what makes for an ideal challenge. So it doesn't always naturally fit with a lot of problems that we know are out there that need a solution. But I would suggest you speak with Laura to see if there's a fit in there for sure. Oh, sorry. Yes, another question.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for your insight. This has been very helpful. I'm coming from the health system, so Steve, I hope it's not the same health system you were referring to earlier.
Are you from Thunder Bay?
Nope.
not to name an area.
Not to name anyone, Steve,
network.
you said.
I'm from far south of Thunder Bay. And so our health system is going to be embarking on a series of innovation procurements, and we're taking a very planned approach to that. So the question that I actually have for you, thinking about what we're doing, is how did you come about your company connecting to the SBIC program, and what things can other public sector organizations or networks do to engage with your organizations to help us communicate our challenges to you?
Well, I'd certainly give you my card after this and exchange info. I honestly don't recall how we found out about the SBIC Identity Challenge. We were talking to various government departments, and someone said, oh, there's going to be an identity challenge, you should look at it. And it may have been, I won't say, it may have been the Premier's office, it may have been someone in e-government. It's so long ago, I have no idea.
2 people told me about it at the same time. One was Laura, who was telling me that she could no longer be my business development manager at the time. And the other was my IRAP representative. And it happened literally almost the same day. And I would say OCE is exceptional at keeping their people in touch. I don't think there's anything happening in this province that I'm not kind of aware of as a result of the mailing letters and constant conversations with them. They've been great.
And thank you. We found out through OC as well. They were already aware that we're working with MTO and invited us to submit a proposal, which we did, and we're successful in being selected for phase 1. So I want to thank OC for thinking of us when SBAC came along.
Laura, have a question?
If I can make a comment.
Okay.
So companies that are interested to know when new challenges are launched, actually, if you sign up on the iPad labeled number 1 on this panel just outside, if you leave us your contact info, we'll definitely be able to notify you when we launch new challenges. And then we should definitely exchange information so I can learn more about the challenge that you're thinking about, and then same as you as well. Yeah. Thanks.
So we've only got another question? Okay, follow up, yep.
So you mentioned that there's 2 more challenge areas that are going to be announced soon in September. Did you say?
September, October, yeah.
Do you know what they are yet, or?
Well, we do. We are working with a number of champion ministries, potential champion ministries, to craft up their problem statement. But we are not able to talk about that, both because they're not finalized, and because as the normal cycle of launching the challenges, it'll go through the OCU network when the time is right. And then there's 2 more to come in the spring, 2019, and to be honest, I have no idea what those are going to be at this point in time. So it's evolving. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So from the perspective of small business, this program's awesome. Government gives you money, you can do whatever you want with this, right? But
well,
pretty much
not
exactly. However,
that sounds really good.
You're saying that there's a problem. We don't know how to solve it.
Yeah.
There's no real criteria for it. And you ask these companies to come up with a solution.
Yep.
I feel there might be a danger from the OCE's perspective, right? How do you know that solution they propose, since it's so poorly defined? Maybe poorly is a bad word, but it's not really defined.
The solution is poorly defined, or the problem
well,
is?
the criteria.
The criteria
for witness.
Right. So we work closely with the champion ministries to really understand the problem as best we can, and to create a series of what we call outcomes. Instead of specifications, we set some outcomes. So what are we trying? What would a solution look like in terms of what it would deliver, as opposed to how it actually works? So it would need to be cost effective. It would need to integrate with legacy systems. It would need to ensure privacy. It would need to, so a series of these kinds of outcomes so that we can, at least get some sense of where that innovation is heading. So it's not quite as wide open, I don't think.
Can I add
so
that?
I guess
I'll add to that.
Igor can answer.
So let me add a little bit of perspective of what happens behind the scenes from a government perspective. So my team, when we meet with the vendor community, so we actually come very well prepared. So my team does a whole bunch of market research, jurisdictional research. I have technical staff, architects, developers, et cetera, doing proof of concepts in a lab environment, testing out various things that we want to test out and what we want to see. Now, that's happening in parallel with what the vendors are perhaps proposing. And in some cases, it's perhaps identical in terms of an approach, okay? Maybe the tools are a little bit different, maybe the solution is a little bit different, but the concept of what we're trying to attain is identical, okay? So we bring that perspective back in our conversations with the various vendors. Now, we do have conversations at perhaps a deeper technical level. We try to understand what is happening, from a solutions perspective, but then we also have it from a business process perspective as well that we're trying to see. So it's not a wild west. It's not that open. We do provide some structure and guidance in terms of what we'd like to see. And maybe, I don't know if Mike and Steve, if you guys want to comment on the dialogues that we've had in terms of the information exchange, that might provide some more insight.
Yeah, I would say that our proposal was pretty detailed. It wasn't a throw this over the fence and hope they give us a contract. It was very detailed on how we're going to deliver e-identity, how it's going to be secure, what are the process flows look like, what does the user experience look like. It was one of the largest bids we've ever done in terms of content and info. And the fact that the champion ministry didn't have a prescription of how it would work was irrelevant. They had the statement of how it should perform and what it should do, and we filled in the details as we know them, based on what we know about the technology, as to how we would deliver it. And so it wasn't just, we're going to do anything with the money. We're doing what we said now, and yeah.
You can see the challenge, actually. It's on the OCE website still, I think, right? And if you read through it, you'll see, I think, that it is quite detailed, despite not being an RFP. Detailed enough that it made a lot of work for guys like us to actually respond to it in a substantial way that would allow us to be, to be warranting the award of this contract. So,
and fair enough, it is a lot of money that we're being paid to develop and deliver. We need to come up with a quarter of it, so there's still a substantial investment on our side. But
don't forget, they'll also ask you how you're going to commercialize and how you're going to make money off of it and whether it's worth developing or not. They're going to evaluate you against not just them as a customer, because they didn't guarantee to buy our products, right? So start thinking about how you're going to sell it to somebody else in some other country at the same time.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's it for questions. I'm afraid I had a whole bunch of more difficult ones that you guys were luckily able to avoid. But thank you very much, audience, for your questions. We do appreciate it. And I wanted to say thanks to our panel for stepping up here and helping to talk about what I think is a pretty awesome program. And I hand it back over to Tanya.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So thanks, Robert, for moderating. Thank you, Igor, Steve, Mike, and Pavel. You've provided some really valuable insights for the many stakeholders here. And you've given us a better insight on how to introduce and encourage innovation in the public sector. I also enjoyed hearing about the level of collaboration. So whether it was collaboration amongst your various partners and the collaboration that you're experiencing with the OC and the champion ministries is really great to hear. Special thanks to Laura. She's come up a couple of times. She's been responsible for leading the program with Robert, this panel, and also for those of you in the audience, if you want to learn more about these innovation procurement projects, whether it's in the health, education, now more broadly in the public sector, I invite you to look at the interactive panel that's just outside the theater. It gives you a great insight into the various projects as well. And of course, if you want to sign up to be on the SBC list, let us know. That would be great. So thank you all. I know this is a busy conference and lots of choice, so thank you for choosing us. So I'll ask you to enjoy the rest of Discovery and join us for the networking reception at 6:15 on the show floor. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Thank you.